Nobody in that briefing room expected the reporter to have the physical page, not the deputy press secretary watching from the side wall, not the two senior correspondents in the front row who had been covering the Epstein file releases for 6 months and believed, based on everything they had been told, that the specific document the reporter was now holding had not been released, could not have been released, and would not be released until a legal review process that the DOJ had described as ongoing was complete. Leavitt had said it herself 3 weeks earlier, from that same podium, in the specific, flat, non-negotiable register she uses for statements she considers closed. That document does not exist in the public record. She had said it once. She had said it without qualification. She had moved on. The reporter was now holding it. What happened in the following 90 seconds is the subject of this story. Not the document's contents. Those were reported everywhere, analyzed by 17 legal experts before midnight, placed beside the administration's prior statements in threads that needed no editorial guidance. What nobody fully accounted for was the specific inventory of Leavitt's face across those 90 seconds, the way it moved through 4 distinct states in a room where she had never, in any previous briefing across any previous controversy, been seen to move through more than 2. Rewind to May 2025, the same podium. A reporter asking about Phase 1 of the Epstein file release, specifically what was missing from it, specifically the 53 pages that Democrats had identified as absent from the DOJ database. Leavitt had answered with the particular forward energy of a press secretary who is certain of the ground she is standing on. She had said the DOJ would release the full Epstein files. She had said she was certain of it. She had used the word certain, not confident, not hopeful, not optimistic. Certain. The word of someone who has been briefed on the outcome and is transmitting the briefing to a room that is expected to receive it. The 53 pages were not in Phase 1. They were not in Phase 2. When a reporter asked about them in September, Leavitt described the Epstein narrative as a hoax designed to distract from the administration's legislative agenda. When a reporter asked in November, the day Epstein's 2019 email surfaced, the one in which he wrote that Trump knew about the girls, Leavitt stood at the podium for 44 minutes and described the emails as a selective leak, a fabricated narrative, a smear campaign coordinated with liberal cable channels. She said the word hoax 11 times across those 44 minutes. She said, moving on, twice. She did not say the 53 pages didn't exist. She said the narrative around them was a hoax. The distinction is precise. The distinction is the kind that a press secretary trained in legal language makes deliberately, saying the narrative is a hoax rather than saying the documents are fabricated, because fabricated can be tested, and narrative is a category of judgment. Then the DOJ released the pages, not voluntarily, in response to a federal judge's order following a FOIA lawsuit filed by a coalition of press organizations. The release happened on a Tuesday evening, 6:47 p.m., after the briefing had ended for the day. By 7:12 p.m., the documents were in the hands of every major newsroom. By 8:30 p.m., 3 outlets had published full analyses. By the time the following morning's briefing began, every reporter in that room had read them. The reporter in the third row had printed one page, one specific page, not the most explosive, not the one that had generated the most overnight coverage. The page that contained a specific date and a specific location and a specific description that placed beside Leavitt's September statement created the most precise available demonstration of what the narrative is a hoax had been constructed to avoid saying. She had folded it in thirds. She had kept it in her notebook. She had waited for the question about the Epstein files, which was the 4th question of the morning, asked by someone else, answered by Leavitt in the now familiar cadence of someone walking a path they have walked before and know the footing of. Then the reporter in the third row raised her hand. Leavitt acknowledged her. She stood. She said, "I want to follow up on the document question." She said, "Specifically, you said in September that," and she quoted the statement exactly, from memory, without notes, the way you quote something you have been carrying in your head for 3 weeks because you knew this moment was coming and wanted to be certain of the words when it arrived. She said, "You said that document does not exist in the public record." She said, "I have it here." She held it up. The room did not erupt. It went still. The specific stillness of a briefing room in which something has been produced that changes the coordinate system of the exchange, and everyone present is recalibrating before they speak. Leavitt's face moved through the first state, a compression around the eyes, brief, involuntary, the physical grammar of someone whose brain has registered a discrepancy before the professional infrastructure has had time to manage the registration. It lasted less than a second. The camera caught it. She said, "I'd need to see what you're referring to." Her voice was level, her posture was unchanged, but her left hand, which had been resting on the podium's surface, moved. A slow adjustment, fingers spreading and resettling, the unconscious repositioning of a person who has shifted their weight without meaning to. The reporter walked to the front of the room. She placed the page on the podium's surface. She stepped back. Leavitt looked at it. The second state, a stillness in the face that was different from her standard briefing stillness. Not composed, but held. The distinction between a face at rest and a face that is being kept at rest by active effort. Her eyes moved across the page in a sequence that a journalist seated in the second row later described as too fast and then too slow. Fast across the first paragraph, the kind of reading that is confirming rather than discovering, then slow on a specific section near the bottom, the kind of slowness that arrives when the eyes find the thing they were hoping not to find. She straightened. She said, "This document has been selectively presented without the context that the DOJ's accompanying statement provides." The reporter said, "The DOJ's accompanying statement is on the reverse side of that page. I printed both sides." The room produced a sound, not laughter, not the sharp intake of a dramatic reveal, but the low, sustained, involuntary sound of 400 people in a press corps that has been tracking this story for 6 months, recognizing simultaneously that the thing they have been told does not exist is on the podium. The third state in Leavitt's face, a tightening around the jaw that she managed in under 2 seconds, bringing her expression back to level, the speed of the management itself visible as evidence of the effort it required. She said, "The president has been exonerated by the totality of the Epstein files." She said his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein ended when he removed him from Mar-a-Lago because Jeffrey Epstein was a creep. She said, "We are moving on." She said the phrase, the specific phrase, the same 2 words from November, from every briefing where the Epstein questions had arrived at the point where the inventory of available responses had been exhausted, and the only remaining option was momentum, forward, away from the podium, toward the next question, toward the next subject, toward any ground that was not this ground. A reporter in the front row said, "With respect, the document on the podium is dated." Leavitt did not look at the page. She looked at the reporter. The fourth state. Not anger in the performed sense, not the theatrical elevation of a press secretary who wants the room to see her displeasure, something quieter and more expensive than that. The look of someone who has arrived at the edge of a prepared position and is standing at it, looking at the distance between where they are and where the document says they should be, and deciding in real time what the crossing of that distance costs. She said, "I've answered the question." She said it once. In the register of a statement that is finished. She looked at the press corps. She said, "Next question." The reporter in the third row sat down. She did not retrieve the page from the podium. It remained there, face up, printed on both sides, in the space between the press secretary and the cameras. For the remaining 22 minutes of the briefing, nobody referenced it again. Leavitt did not move it. It sat on the podium surface the way a document sits when it has already done what it came to do and is simply waiting for the room to finish acknowledging it. At 3:14 a.m., a network received an anonymous communication from a former DOJ official on matching letterhead. No name, 1 paragraph, confirming that the 53-page document set had been identified as inadvertently withheld during the initial review process and had been flagged internally 6 weeks before the FOIA order compelled its release, and that the flagging had been communicated up the chain. 1 line at the bottom. The inventory of what was known, when it was known, and what was said at the podium during the interval between those 2 dates is in the public record. It requires only alignment. The network verified the letterhead. No counterstatement arrived before morning. Leavitt posted from her personal account at 11:47 p.m. She said the briefing had been another example of media obsession with a debunked narrative. She said the president had nothing to hide and had proven it by supporting the full release of the Epstein files. She said, "The American people see through this." She said it with the forward energy of someone who knows that forward energy is the only available instrument when the document is already on the podium and has been there, face up, for 22 minutes. In every photograph taken in that room this morning, the inventory of her May statement, and her September statement, and her November statement, placed beside the page, she said did not exist in the public record, does not require annotation. It requires only the date on each statement, and the date on the document, and the specific distance between them. The interval across which the thing that could not exist was being compiled, flagged, reviewed, and eventually placed on a podium by a reporter who had printed both sides. After everything you just saw, ask yourself one thing. What else has been hiding behind the noise? Subscribe and turn on notifications, because this story isn't over, it's just getting started.